Hello and welcome to a new podcast from WeThe15, the biggest ever human rights movement aiming to end discrimination of persons with disabilities, who make up 15% of the world's population. WeThe15, Access All Areas, is made by the same team behind A Winning Mindset Lessons from the Paralympics, which was the award-winning official podcast of the International Paralympic Committee. My name is Andy Stevenson, I'm a sports broadcaster, and I happen to have a disability myself. Join me in this new series as we take a look at society and investigate how attitudes can be changed to create more opportunities for persons with disabilities, as well as improving representation and amplifying a range of diverse voices. Well, in theory, this should be the most entertaining episode of the WeThe15 podcast because we are talking about entertainment with Keely Cat-Wells, a disability rights advocate and co-founder of Making Space. She is passionate about getting more people with disabilities on screen in the TV and film industry, having moved from being an actress herself into the world of talent representation. And Keith Jones, a DJ in the hip-hop world who has cerebral palsy. He is the president of Soul Touching Experiences, and he helped create Krip Hop Nation with his friend Leroy Moore, which is a crossroads of music, disability and diversity. Keely, if I could start with you. First of all, actually, let's talk about your own performing career, because obviously you've become a talent spotter supreme, but you are full of talent yourself and used to be a performer. So just talk us through that and explain to people listening what your skills were.
Yes, thank you. It's so funny. It's a chapter of my life that I kind of even forget about now in many ways, because it's like it feels like a whole nother life, the previous life. But really, it led to the work that I'm doing today, because when I moved to the US to pursue a career within the entertainment industry, I ended up losing a job due to disability discrimination. So that was really the light bulb for me and the light bulb for See Talent. And I was actually chatting with someone yesterday about how training as a professional performer and really working in the entertainment industry since the age of 9 years old, it definitely taught me determination, the work ethic that you need. And I think being an entrepreneur is, you definitely have to pull from a lot of those experiences to keep going and to get what you need to get done, because it takes a lot, especially being a disabled entrepreneur when you're also up against an inaccessible society. So yes, it was a big part of my life and has definitely helped me in this new chapter.
And the incident that sort of brought your own performing career to a crashing halt, really, you mentioned it there. You had a role rescinded, didn't you, because of a factor to do with your own disability. Do you mind just telling us about that and the way that made you feel and the way it's kind of motivated you to do what you do now?
Yeah, a massive part of it was I didn't really even identify as disabled before that moment. I had come out of 4 years in hospital and I knew that my life was very different. I knew that I was chronically ill, and I mainly identified as like a chronically ill person. But then when I ended up losing that role, the light bulb went off, and I actually leveraged and used social media so much to figure out my identity and to learn from other people who were really proud of the disabled community and being disabled, but still had complicated relationships with their conditions. And it was then that I was like, oh, this is an identity that I am no longer too afraid to lean into, even though it has created so much negative impact in my life and completely taken kind of the dream that I had to a standstill. But it was just a very pivotal moment in how I looked at myself and embraced my new reality.
And do you think, I'll bring in Keith in a moment, because without being rude, Keith, you're a little bit older than Keely and probably experienced a different generation and different different kind of generational attitudes. But I mean, Keely, do you think actually that in some ways, and actually I sometimes think this about, my own disability, sort of, I was born missing 3 limbs, and I sometimes think, crikey, I'm lucky actually I was born when I was, because now I'm an adult at a time when attitudes are probably quite different to the way they were when I was born. Technology is different. There are all sorts of, accessibility in some places is very different. Do you ever sort of think actually, yes, I've only been able to go ahead and do the things I've done because, I'm living right now rather than back in the 80s or 90s.
Absolutely. A reminder every single day when I have access to things that I wouldn't have had access to, 34 years ago, less than, or more than even. And it's people like Keith, it's people like Judy Human, it's people who have been doing this work for decades. This is not new work. This is not something that I think we often see. I mean, I personally had no idea about the work that was done, the Equalities Act in the UK, the ADA in the US, Section 504, all of the laws that exist. I had no idea before I became disabled. And that was definitely a wake-up call, recognizing that why do I only know about this because it personally affects me? We've got to start looking for the issues that exist in our society for groups of people that we don't necessarily identify with. And that's why we're in such a pickle in this society, because we do genuinely usually only work on things and care about things that directly affect us. And that's not okay. So that was also a big reality. But yes, we stand on the shoulders of the giants that have paved the way for us. And I'm so grateful to live and be disabled in a time like now, because so much work has been done and so much progress has been made. And we have to celebrate that. Although we see so many issues that still exist, we absolutely have to celebrate the wins for sure.
And that brings me nicely onto you, Keith. You grew up in the 70s. Paint a picture of maybe how things were for you then and how you've seen things change, hopefully, for the better.
Well, seeing that I'm slightly older than you both, the difference is really about what you just talked about. It was vastly different. Like, the realities of people with disabilities were, we were not legal to be really in school in the United States fully until 1979. I was 10 when it was legal for me to be fully in school. We were not fully included in classrooms. Even now, there's still substantially segregated classrooms. Wanting to be an actor or an actress or performer, even when I was doing, when I was younger, wanting to be a rapper and being all these things, it wasn't that I didn't have the talent, it was the attitudinal barriers. So if you add disability laws that are, because they used to call them the ugly laws. So you could literally be picked up off the street for being an eyesore in the community if you have a disability. So the realities of what it was and what it is are still the same. We have a lot more protections now because we do have federal regulations. We have great work. We've done a lot of advocacy over the last couple of decades. But I think where we are now is vastly superior than where we were when I was a kid. But there are still a lot of significant challenges just to our community, because people, it's like Keely, like you said, some people tend to come to disability and they go, oh my God, I didn't know it was like this. And they're like, yeah, it's kind of, that kind of been like the, but it's also, and it also strengthens our community by giving us new allies to say, okay, so instead of waiting for something to happen, how can we build bridges so we can get over that gap as opposed to getting caught in?
I mean, Keith, you offer sort of another interesting element in all this, because obviously you're a black man, you were black and disabled. Is sort of, people might describe that as a bit of a double whammy, particularly back in the 70s. And were there times where, I don't know, sort of you didn't know whether you were being discriminated against because of your race or because of your disability, or I guess there were times where you maybe felt because of both?
Well, that was yesterday. So that was 2 weeks ago. That was me being in a hotel in New York last week. My disability is very visible. So if you have a hidden disability, there's a double-edged sword, because now you're walking around like, do I tell people? Because the kind of attitudinal barriers that will come with it. But being very visible with my cerebral palsy and being black and sexy at the same time, it is a burden. But it's the irony is that when you have those encounters, you're not sure, because people will come up to you and violate your personal space. So you constantly are evaluating, are people seeing me as a human, are they looking at me as this pitiful kind of person? But if I show up in a place where there are no Black people, then you have to start thinking, am I dealing with racism? And I've been asked, what did your mother do for you to end up that way? So it's all of these projections. Even in London, when I was in Westminster, the looks on the streets as I'm rolling in my wheelchair was like, why are you here? So I think the situation about anti-Blackness, anti-able, people being ableist are often hand in hand, and they are often lost in the fact that people are also misogynistic. But I think we've gotten to a point where our community and the disability community are starting to wrestle with our own internal ableisms and our own fractions, but I think we are better for it. So the experiences being Black and disabled on any given day can be quite interesting.
You are both in different ways trying to create change in the entertainment industry, and we're here to talk about entertainment. So Keely, paint a picture for us. I mean, I should say, by the way, as well, people listening might think Keely sounds quite British, but she's out in LA. We should say that you moved to the US from the UK, but you've been there for some time now, out in LA near Hollywood. So paint a picture of, if I'm in the USA, how many disabled people am I seeing on my TV screen, or in films, or in adverts, or on stage, for example?
Yeah, not enough. Definitely not enough.
Not enough.
Not enough. I think currently it's still only around 2% of disabled people on screen. And if I correct me if I'm wrong, but I am pretty sure 95% of that 2% is non-disabled people playing disabled people still today. And then within advertising, we're looking at less than 1% within advertising. And I will say, though, with social media, we have had such an amazing opportunity to change the narrative without having to rely on Hollywood to change first or allow us in the doors. There have been disabled creators who have been literally flipping the script and creating new narratives about what it's like to be a disabled person, and also just normalizing being experts in subjects beyond just disability, because they've been posting about their love lives, their expertise within, whether it's science or being a teacher. It's all of these different narratives that we have wished and we've been wanting to see in Hollywood and on our screens, but just have not had the permission to do so. And finally, we are kind of taking back control and saying, actually, we are all of these things and we're going to tell our own stories.
I think here in the UK, and you will remember, I'm sure, before you moved out to the States, but one thing that crops up time and time again is how the Paralympic Games can be a driver. You see a lot more disabled people now on British television, on game shows, reality programs, dramas, soap operas, etc. And it feels like London 2012 was a turning point on that. Is the fact that the Paralympics is coming to LA in 2028, and I know you're working hard on the NBC coverage to find new talent, but is the Paralympics in 2028 a driver out in the States to kind of increase those figures?
Absolutely. The Paralympics opens so many doors for us, and not just the doors that I think most people think about in relation to sport directly. It's really an opportunity for us to, also from an employment standpoint, get disabled people hired in so many different roles, create careers versus just jobs, and have that visibility. I think Keith mentioned the ugly laws, and from that, the erasure that just exists still to this day with disability and disabled people on our screens. So the Paralympics is such an amazing opportunity to just be like, we are here, we exist, we are valuable, and we are talented. Hire us, fund us, see us. So I'm personally very excited for the upcoming games in Paris, and then of course the games coming to my home city in LA in 2028.
And Keith, do you kind of agree with what Keely's saying there in your world, in the world of music and hip hop?
Yeah, I mean, what's so funny is that I remember people being excited about a kid being on TV with a disability. Most of the time that you would see us would be on telethons and like, oh my God, here's the poor disabled child, right?
I've been on a telethon. I've been in a slow motion montage of getting people to give us their money.
And And here they go. Here's Andy, and here's Keely, and here's Keith. Right? But I think what we've been finding, and even with this coverage and what you guys are doing in terms of the talent search, and I remember the launching of the WeThe15, I think a lot of people forgot that even when you study the World Health Organization data, 15% of the global population is kind of an undercount. And in terms of the music or the acting, it's really interesting, but it's still a challenge to get people to cast you as a romantic lead, to cast you as an action star, or to cast you as a dramatic lead in a crime drama where, and even within that, there are only particular disabilities that we tend to see in the place. So I would love to, from where it's come to where it is now, light years of advancement, but where we need to go, light years to go. But I think we're on the right path with the younger generation, because everybody's on social media. Like, that's where all the cool kids are. And I think what people are acknowledging is that the pandemic kind of drove us there, and people with disabilities started finding their communities online and started seeing, oh, we can exchange our gifts, our talents, and our skill sets. So it would be nice if Hollywood would pick up the slack, and cut a check. It would be, I'm good, right? But in the process, I think when they see us see talent, or they see Andrea Levant, or they see a Sam Habib, or they'll see, Keely, or they'll see Keith, or they'll see Krip Hop Nation or something like that, coming from communities, they're like, parents are like, I didn't even know my child had that kind of opportunity. So I think a lot of the things that we've seen over the last 10 years, even going forward, and I'm excited to see the coverage, but would definitely drive the narrative about we are not our disability, it is a part of us, and we are human.
Keith, when you're, in a club, when you're DJing, when you're doing what you do, are people aware of your cerebral palsy? And if they are, you must have had a whole range of reactions to that, because you're a very atypical person, an unusual person when it comes to the world of any music to a certain extent, but I imagine particularly in hip hop.
Oh yeah, but in my experience, and even as a co-founder of Krip Hop Nation with Rob Denoise Temple and Leroy Moore, what has consistently been, it's not the communities, it's been the industries that profit from the art. So other disabled artists, everybody, people get excited to see me make beats with my feet. Oh my God, I didn't know you programmed with your feet. But in order to get to a Sony Polygram or to an Arista or to a Warner Music Group, it turns into marketing. How can you market a disabled rapper? Like, it doesn't get to our talent, it gets to their perception of. So in these spaces, typically, especially in hip hop, when I started, it was, oh, the crippled kids can't do this. And then we get on stage and destroy them. So but it's literally, it's almost a paradoxical existence, because you are doing what you love while at the same time wrestling with, do I want to advocate all the time? Or do I just want to be an artist?
I hugely empathize with that. In my career as a sports reporter, particularly when I was younger, not so much now, but I just kept my head down and sort of wanted to just prove I could do the job almost before people knew I was disabled. Keely, do you see that with some of the talent you represent, that they are perhaps understandably a bit nervous maybe about kind of revealing their disability right from the start? If, for example, they're working in voiceover or radio where they can kind of do the job without even being known as disabled.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when I was at See Talent, it would always be a conversation with the talent too around their identities. How did they want to be presented, and making sure that we're not speaking out of turn or saying anything that they wouldn't want us to, because it is such a personal thing, right? And like, I have a different experience than others, and everyone has a very different experience in our own internalized ableism and our own biases and our own traumas. And we would obviously have our recommendations in the way that we saw pitches work best. But it wasn't always easy, and it's not linear. and it does depend who you're speaking to. And it's not even per company, it's per individual that you are speaking to at that company and their individual and own personal biases. But I will say the amount of times that we were pitching to a brand and getting someone into a project that was not disability specific, and then we would bring in the business case. And I will say, kind of a caveat to the business case, I do hate that we have to continuously legitimize our existence based on the economic power that we hold. But with that said, of course, it was beneficial going into many of these rooms to talk about that business element of the disability community. But then the amount of people that would come out and say, do you know what? I've never told anyone, but I live with this chronic health condition, or I've never told anyone I'm neurodivergent. And you're like, wow, there are so many people just wanting to come out and own their identity, but they're so terrified. So it's so weird to even think like identifying as disabled is really a political act. It's kind of like radical political act. It's kind of wild, but yeah, it was always a difficult thing to navigate. But it's amazing to see more and more people being proud of being disabled.
It feels to me that the entertainment industry carries a really heavy responsibility for this, actually. And that entertainment is the way that disabled people can put themselves out there. So if you're a film star or a singer or a DJ with a disability, you can potentially be known to the entire world. And then your behavior and attitudes are sort of taken as representative of every single disabled person. I see this all the time with Paralympians I interview. I've interviewed Paralympians who are completely different to me in every aspect, you know, their disability, their background, their attitudes, etc. And then somebody on the street might think, oh, well, they're both disabled. They'll think exactly the same way.
Right.
Do you feel there's almost a burden on the entertainment industry to carry the hopes of disabled people across the world in some ways?
I don't know if it's a burden. I think it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Because again, if you're talking about the entertainment industry currently is kind of reeling from the fact that it's rotting from within. You know, you're still talking about pay discrepancies between actresses and actors. You're still talking about role opportunities between non-traditional, quote unquote, beautiful leading women. How do you get to a casting call if it's not accessible? Are the casting calls accessible? Are they even looking for people? You know, and so I think the burden is not, it's a burden because people are comfortable in their biases. So when the opportunity arises, if you're a musician, it's cool, you know, you're more accepted. But even within music, there are certain disabilities that will catapult you above others. So like if you're a blind musician, oh my God, you're reminding of Stevie Wonder or Ray Charles, right? How many cerebral palsy hip hop artists are they going to go, oh my God, Keith, you remind me of, right? So it's those kind of things that I think the industry, for us on the outside or activists, is not necessarily saying, you know, we're making a moral appeal to you. It's that if you are greedy and like money, here is 1.5 billion people on the planet that you can do. This is a untapped market. Right? Like you say, like I literally just got back from doing an event and we were justifying why we need to have the ability to self-direct and self-govern our lives. But it's not because we don't think we can, it's because somebody else is projecting those limitations on us. But it would be dope to have, you know, really varied artists with disabilities be the entertainment throughout the course of the Olympics or the Paralympics, or even doing an integrated version of that, because when somebody who's seeing these athletes, they're not understanding what it takes to get to that point. But if you're coming from an Africa, or if you're coming from Rwanda or Bolivia or Karachi, your disability access is vastly different than it is here. So your entertainment is not going to look like this. So the industry has an ability to put out images, put out music, put out content that is affirming for our community. But so it's not a burden, it's an opportunity. Whether or not they'll take it, we'll see.
And Keely, accessibility is such an issue, isn't it? Because we can all talk about attitudes and ideas and things, but I'm assuming you still go to TV sets and film sets and casting calls, as Keith said, that aren't accessible, and that just undermines the whole thing then, doesn't it?
Oh, it's infuriating. It's exhausting. The amount of events and sets, and especially with the events, this is a hill I will die on. The events that say that they are specifically to uplift underrepresented voices, that they are for diverse communities, that they are promoting equity and equality, but they are not accessible. They don't have accessible entrances. They do not have interpreters. They do not have captions on the videos. I was recently asked to speak on a panel by a very, very well-known woman equalities organization, and it was specifically to speak about accessibility and disability representation within media. But we got to the location and my colleague couldn't get in, and they said, "Oh, we'll host it on the street." No, we will not be hosted on the street and speak on a panel around equity on the street. It's just not okay. So yes, accessibility is first and foremost something that it's just so easy to. It's so simple. The excuses drive me mad. But I do keep going back to you as well, though, the attitudinal barriers, as Keith mentioned, because even if we lived in a fully accessible world, whatever that means, and we still had attitudinal barriers, then ableism still exists. So attitudinal barriers, accessibility barriers, we have to find, everything has to change. Yes. A very rambly way of saying yes, it's annoying.
No, I think also on accessibility, it's important to remember like accessibility for the audience as well. So I'm thinking people going to cinemas and theatres. I mean, Keith, you must have played at nightclubs and concert venues where you're there as a disabled performer on stage, and yet somebody with cerebral palsy out in the audience might not even be able to see you because they're at the back or they've been put in some hidden restricted view area or something.
It is the weirdest, strangest thing, because again, like when you said, we're helping, we're here for all of you except for you can't come in. I mean, we want you, we just not gonna let you in. So it's for the club. So when I have performed, or even when I'm teaching art or when I'm doing these things, the venue, it's always those moments when you show up and the look of terror because they have, and the blood drains out of their face. They're like, oh my God, they actually we actually showed up. I worked as a cultural access. I did, helping venues make sure the programs were accessible, the venues were accessible. What does integrated seating look like? What is open caption look like? What is ASL? And all of these things. We've done this in fashion shows, TV shows. We did it in movies. And I think what's maddening for anybody who just wants to go out to a club is that it's such a production to even get there. So is there transportation that's accessible for me? If I don't use a mobility aid, but I have limited stamina, is there going to be a place for me to sit? Am I going to be able to deal with the sounds? Like we used to do programs and have multiple technical sensitivity. So I think what's maddening is that people are really comfortable in their bias and they really don't want to have to move off of that, even though it is like, okay, I mean, friends and I, we showed up to do a gig and they saw 2 or 3 wheelchairs and were like, we were a fire hazard. It didn't want us to, it didn't want us to do it. So I want to take my significant other to a concert, but all the accessible seats are behind the pole underneath the toilet seat. I don't want to go. And so it's those kind of things that, so I think the barriers are, it's almost like they're being passively aggressive intentional, because these are things that do not have to happen. But if you show up and the green room doesn't have a door that you can open, or if your changing room doesn't have an accessible bathroom, like these are the kind of things, and when you bring it up to the event planners, you can see their frustration. And it's not because you're trying to be annoying, it's like, but they really are comfortable. It's just like talking to a man who's sexist. He'll pretend that he's not up until he deals with a woman.
Yep. It's so true. Sorry, just to add to that too, it's like that deep-seated bias that people think that we won't even be in those spaces. We will. We are.
It's insulting, isn't it? I mean, Keith, with some of these frustrations and the anger that this has caused you, is that some of the motivation behind Krip Hop Nation? Can you tell us a bit about the roots of that?
The impetus was a lot of these artists with disabilities were not getting an opportunity to perform, or have venues that would say your talent is worthy of putting on. So Leroy and Rob had an idea. Leroy came on and got me, and then we built up Krip Hop Nation over the course of the last, up until I stepped away a couple of years ago. We had been together 13, 14 years across 5 continents, 13 countries. So this is from Germany, France, Tanzania, the Congo, Bolivia, India. But the funny part was the struggles were all the same. It was, we just wanted to do our art and be able to do it as everybody else do it. But we keep hitting these walls where, solely because I use a wheelchair, or because I'm blind, or because I'm deaf, or because I'm neurodivergent, that's going to stop me from showing my talent. So that was and is the driving force behind a lot of my work now. But it's so touching, I think, when Keely, when you talked about it, about those venues, that deep-seated bias. So we're using our art to try to elevate the discourse and enlighten folks.
I just want to ask you both, because I'm genuinely interested in this. There's no sort of judgment from me on this. I'm just sort of curious about it, because the term Crip has, Krip Hop, and I'm sure lots of people have seen the brilliant film Crip Camp that won Oscars, I believe, didn't it, in the end? And this the reclamation, if you like, of the term Crip, because if I was called a Crip or a cripple in the street here, I would be greatly, that would be abuse, and I'd be really upset. But the word Crip has kind of been reclaimed, I think, in the States, really. I just wondered if sort of both of you had views on that.
Actually, it's sort of, and this is without being too deep about it, but it's the same, in terms of the B word amongst women, or the N word amongst African Americans. And disabled or crippled amongst the disability community. There's the whole push to say disabled. Disabled is not a dirty word. We took Crip when we did Krip Hop and Krip Camp, because we literally, all the vernacular that you're hearing now is no more than 15 to 20 years old. Like, people saying I'm on the spectrum of neurodiverse. Like, all of those are recent developments. Like, you literally were handicapped or crippled up to, maybe 15 years ago still. So taking that, it's literally taking those things that are used against you and putting a positive spin on it. It's very much a cultural thing. It's just like being Black in America, or being descendants of stolen people. It's the same way with disability in certain aspects, reclaiming Crip, because one, it's going to trigger somebody. But it's also a way to open up the conversation and say, why are you so offended with me using the term Crip when you literally have 4 steps into your store and you don't want to put a ramp? But you're mad that I'm calling myself crippled. But you're crippling me by putting barriers into it. So it's a play on words. It's really to use it's really to turn the mirror onto them. So claiming Crip is really, it's a middle finger to the world, basically.
Keely, what's your take on it?
Oh, I mean, I love everything Keith said. Definitely mic drop on that last sentence for sure. I mean, I think I'm still, in the grand scheme of things, relatively new to being disabled and the disabled community, and have so much to learn. And I remember when I first started seeing kind of the reclaiming of the term Crip, and immediately I was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. But the more and more that I learn from my disabled elders and disabled peers, I'm like, yes, okay, I get it. I love it. I love that. So yeah, I mean, I think Keith said it best.
And Keely, I mean, I think, we should try to end on some positives here. I mean, we always want more, of course, and we always want better, but things are hugely improving in the entertainment industry when it comes to all of these issues we've been discussing around inclusion and diversity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so excited so I sold C Talent in 2022. And then last year I left to build my next company, which is Making Space. And I have the absolute privilege and honor of getting to work with Sophie Morgan, who is my co-founder. And we've been able to build partnerships with Netflix, Amazon, NBC, and get people hired and get people to have those career advancement and career mobility opportunities. And we plan to do that at scale. And it's exciting to see the adoption quite quickly. We're still new, but there's been a lot of excitement around it. And then on the media side, Sophie and I have been determined to tell the untold stories of the disabled community. And we have managed to get a first look deal with Reese Witherspoon's company, Hello Sunshine. And it's been incredible to see their excitement around using their model of what they did with women and how they changed the narrative for women for disabled people, and how we've been able to work with them and leverage their platform and their expertise, and change is happening. We've got our first documentary coming out this year, and we're extremely excited about just the domino effect, I think, that we can have as soon as one person says yes, and it kind of goes from there. So there are absolutely good things happening. And again, it's just thanks to the community who've been doing this work for much longer than I've been alive.
You mentioned there the difference that social media has made, and I guess it's difficult for any of us to get a crystal ball out and see what social media will look like when LA 2028 comes round. But let's go sort of beyond that, 5, 10, maybe even 15 years time. Is one of the goals to try and bring what individuals are doing on social media into the mainstream? Or is it kind of a case of leaving that stuff where it is and then doing something different when it comes to TV and film?
Well, I think it's giving the people who unfortunately have had to find other routes and other means to tell their stories because mainstream hasn't accepted them. It's giving them the opportunity and finally the platforms to be able to do it in the biggest way possible. I think it's about finding the most marginalized people, because there's that famous quote, right, that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. So it's getting those talented people the opportunity that they deserve and need.
And Keith, what about in your world of music and hip hop? Is it again about sort of, as Keely sort of touched on there, that there will be other, I mean, you probably know, you're probably in touch with some of them. There will be other disabled people out there who are making fantastic hip hop music and they just need a break.
Yeah, I think it, projecting down the line, because from where it started, when I started to where it is now to where it's going to go, I think, but again, using what Keelan just said, it's an opportunity. I think because of the way the music distribution, talent distribution, you literally now people are turning themselves into content creators on TikTok or Instagram Reels. People putting out videos. People have always been doing that. It's how do you get from I have 3,000 views on YouTube to I'm getting 300 million views because I'm broadcast on NBC. What is that gap between how do I get my stuff, from out of the barbershop into a commercial on the Paralympics? Those usually are the dialogue shifters and the platform elevators, because as much as even if you're on TikTok, and you've heard it, people talk about the algorithms suppressing their content. So as much as there's social media platforms that elevate these stories, there still are certain limitations as to how you can get your content out, because you are still beholden to a larger entity. Technology has allowed us to be more expressive, but the pipelines have become more restricted. So it's doing stuff like Keely's doing. It's teaching the kids how to market their business. But also just building new platforms. So we'll be launching, hopefully, our streaming service later on. We'll be launching a media brand or something like that. I mean, we're literally building it, because as much as I would love Disney to give me $1 million contract, $100 million deal, are they really looking at my demographic, right? Or is the Warner Brothers really going to say, we want more artists who look like 15% of the population? Do they want the WeThe15 brand on their thing? And so I think the opportunity is there, and I'm really excited about particularly what you guys are going to do in the Paralympics, because people are going to go, oh my God, I didn't know you guys could do that.
I mean, Keely's getting support from the likes of Reese Witherspoon in the acting profession. Do you have that sort of, support from some of the big figures in hip hop, the big non-disabled figures?
Oh, hell no. Hell no. I would love it. It's different than saying I'm going to put a disabled hip hop artist on my record label and then do all of this promotion behind it to market this guy. It would be nice if we had, you just had a lot of people come out and accept their diagnosis of autism, their new things, but people, because they are acknowledging their disability, are not necessarily allies in the disability struggle. But there are some icons in the game who are giving me much love. We just did the We've Been Here with Dr. Dre from the MTV Raps, and and some talented artists from around the world. So in terms of will I get a Kendrick shout out, or will I get a Dr. Dre from or a Compton shout out? I don't know, but I think the beauty of it is that the youth and the people and the young kids who see me do it now feel like they have no excuse. There's nothing that can stop them. So if nobody talks to me, it's the kids coming behind me that I'm excited to see blow it up. And I know some really amazing, talented youth around the world who are going to change it. And so I don't really worry about whether or not they support me. It's just don't block the blessings for the others. We're good to go.
Keely, the issue of non-disabled actors playing disabled roles, you've already, it's obvious how much that frustrates you. Why on earth does that seemingly keep happening? Because there's actually always an outcry about it. And then the next year, another film comes out and the same things happen. So why does it keep happening? And actually, is there any sign at all of that changing?
It's interesting. Non-disabled actors have seen playing a disabled character as the biggest and most exciting challenge of their career. And historically, we've seen so many non-disabled actors win awards for playing disabled people. I think much of it is rooted in the unknowns and complex human experience of being disabled. They are fascinated by it. But no one, you can't play being disabled. It is a lived experience that truly can't be acted, or you can't pretend. It blows my mind that it still happens, especially when there is this huge pool of extremely talented people who have not had the opportunity. And as much as we would love to get disabled actors playing typically non-disabled roles that are just written with anyone in mind, the doctors, the lawyers, the politicians, etc., that aren't necessarily written with a disability, we want to get disabled people playing those roles. But unfortunately, because of the biases and the attitudinal barriers, people haven't considered disabled people for those roles before. So as soon as a role that comes up that is specifically written for a disabled character, you would think that this would be the perfect opportunity to get these talented people in the room. But it just doesn't happen like that. It's baffling. So I don't know what we can do to stop it from happening other than just continue with the work that we are already doing and try and get people to see the mistakes that they are making. And I do think kind of to what Keith was mentioning around, we may not see it in our generation. It may be the generation after us, and that's okay. So it's a journey. We have to just continue to do the work and make noise and make space for up ears. And that was not a plug for my company.
I believe you. Thousands wouldn't. Listen, Keely, Keith, thanks so much to you both for giving us the time to chat on this WeThe15 podcast. And it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great stuff from Keely and Keith. Thanks to them. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's now going to go away and listen to some hip hop. Next week's episode of the WeThe15 podcast focuses on product and design. I'll be joined by Dr. Josh Loebner, Global Head of Inclusive Design at VML. He works with some of the world's biggest brands on accessibility and innovation. And Christina Mallon, who has helped the likes of Tommy Hilfiger, Unilever, and currently works for Microsoft on inclusive design.